So this is carrying on looking at the life of Elijah, and this is the most famous part of Elijah's life, or most well known. So it's quite a long passage, okay? So Rachel's going to read it out.
I can see it. Okay. Yeah, okay, this is 1 Kings 18. So it says, when Ahab saw Elijah, he said to him, "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" I have not made trouble for Israel," Elijah replied. "But you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals. Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah, who eat at Jezebel's table." So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." But the people said nothing. Then Elijah said to them, I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, and let them cut into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set it to fire. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you will call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, he is God. Then all the people said, "What you say is good." Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, "Choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire." So they took the bull given them and prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. "Baal, answer us," they shouted, but there was no response. No one answered, and they danced around the altar they had made. At noon Elijah began to taunt them. "Shout louder," he said. "Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or travelling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened." So they shouted louder and louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come here to me." They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, "Your name shall be Israel." With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it, large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, "Fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood." "Do it again," he said, and they did it again. "Do it a 3rd time," he ordered, and they did it a 3rd time. The water ran down the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, "Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people would know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, "The Lord, he is God! The Lord, he is God!" Then Elijah commanded them, "Seize the prophets of Baal. Don't let anyone get away." They seized them, and Elijah had them brought down to Kishon Valley and slaughtered there.
So after 3.5 years, of drought, and Elijah being told to go hide yourself. Now he's told, now go show yourself. Now it's time. Now it's time to show yourself to the king again. And this is, there you go. I want to look at three things tonight, okay? I want to look at the unfair, the uncertain, and the unworthy. Okay? So firstly, you've got these unfair fights. Okay? Like I like boxing. Okay? I enjoy boxing, and I've done it for a number of years. And there was once I had to in the gym, and I was paired up. Everyone got paired up, and I ended up getting paired up with a geezer who was 6'4" and he was 22 stone. Okay? And thankfully I didn't have to fight him, right? But what we had to do was we were doing these various exercises together. One of which you had to leapfrog over and then crawl through each other's legs. Okay, so for me, that was okay. It was quite a leap to get over him, I've got to say, but I could virtually walk through his legs. Right? But when it came to him leapfrogging over me, let's just say this 22 stone man was not particularly nimble, right? And he came running up to me and he puts his hands on me to leapfrog over, and I just crumpled on the ground. I just like splat, and it was an unfair fight. We were mismatched. Okay, what you've got here with Elijah, this is an unfair fight. By any stretch of the imagination. You see that Elijah has got, he says, he picks a fight with 450 prophets of Baal. Right? He says to all the nation, I want you up the mountain, right? This compromised Israel that had been kind of following this soppy leader that had like compromised their faith. He says, well, I want you all up there. So that he completely outnumbered 450 prophets of Baal. He also says, right, the 400 prophets of Asherah that eat at Jezebel's table. I want you up there and all. Now, I'm not great at maths, but that's 850 to 1. Alright? And in a time of drought, okay, and starving, these guys had been eating at the Queen's table. So they'd have been there in all their finery, probably quite portly and quite smug because they're well fed and the others are hungry. 450, 400, the whole nation against them. More than that, this was on Mount Carmel. Mount Carmel was the centre of Baal worship. This was home territory. Okay, this was where Baal was at his most powerful. Also, Baal was this fertility god that was known as the god of storms. And like archaeologists have found these little figurines of this Baal, and he's always holding this lightning bolt. Everything was stacked against Elijah. He said, you can choose whichever ball you want. And then he says, right, I want you to pour water over. I want you to not just like sprinkle, I want you to drench this sacrifice with water. In a time of drought, this precious water was poured on this sacrifice so that there couldn't ever be any kind of excuse of, spontaneous combustion or whatever. It was never going to happen. It was totally, he with his back against the wall. Totally. And surely we can feel like that sometimes. Help me out. What is the population of West Lothian and the area, or Livingston?
About 150,000, I think.
150,000?
Livingston's like 60,000.
Okay.
I'm going to say Scotland, I was going to say 5 million.
Okay, alright. Well, you go for Scotland, bruv. That's it. But yeah, okay, so 150,000. And how many of us are in here? Right. Now, I'm not good at maths, but that's like, there must be 0.001%, whatever. We're back to right against the wall, and I'm saying our, I feel part of it with you. I know I'm not living here, but I'm praying for you and in your corner.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's like, there's this sense of overwhelming odds against you. It's all stacked against you. It really is. I can't. Is Nicola Sturgeon in here? I don't think she is she?
Fucking about,
No. I can't see any major politicians or kind of movers and shakers amongst us. But, and yet you're not
Politics
feeling...
event going on to do.
Eh?
There was a politics event going on to do. We're walking back from the...
So that's
True.
just an independent.
Not here though.
They're not
My cousin is back in Livingston, told me.
Yeah, but they're not listening to us, are they? At the minute. At the minute. And it's like you might feel it in your college, you might feel like you're only one, or the only one in your family. The only one down your road, the only one on the building site that you're on, or in the office that you're in. And we feel like the odds are stacked against us. It's an unfair fight. Secondly, it's kind of uncertain. Right? There's this uncertainty about what's happening in the future. Right? I'm going to read something from Deuteronomy 6. This was written by Moses some hundreds of years earlier. And he wrote this, he says, "When the Lord your God brings you into the land he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, to give you, a land large with flourishing cities that you did not build, houses filled with all kinds of good things you did not provide, wells you did not dig, vineyards and olive groves you did not plant, then when you eat and are satisfied, be careful that you do not forget the Lord. You see, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. Fear the Lord your God, serve him only, and take your oaths in his name. Do not follow other gods, the gods of the people around you." Now, the context of this, when it was written, they'd just been brought out of slavery in the most dramatic fashion possible. They'd come out, there was about 1 million people came out of Egypt. All right? And God actually parted the sea so that they could come out. He provided food for them on a daily basis. And he's saying, oh, Moses is right, don't forget the Lord. When you come, it was unthinkable that they were ever going to forget what God had done for them. But yet there it is, written, inscribed in law, that they shouldn't forget when things get comfortable, when things get easy. And the truth is, there's things tolerated in our generation that a couple of generations ago would be unthinkable. I mean, I remember watching Top of the Pops with my nan when I was a kid. It used to be a Thursday night, and you used to watch, and you had Susie Quattro jiggling around in her leather trousers, and my nan and granddad were going, "Oh, shocking, shocking," you know, or Shawaddy Waddy undoing their cardigans, or so, you know, and it was, and my nan and granddad were getting shocked at the compromise and the figure. What would they think of the soft porn that's, you know, past as videos these days, or music videos? What would they think about Love Island? You know, and you know what? And it's like the fact, but the trouble is, it's like a sausage. They just the delicatessen. It's just a little slice and a little slice and another slice and another slice, and before you know it, it's kind of half gone. And we've grown up with this kind of, we've kind of anaesthetised to the fact that the society is going to hell in a handbasket on our watch. And it's happening, and we've got used to it. This unthinkable compromise for a nation that once loved God. And Elijah calls them out. He says, you've got to make a choice. Because what was happening was they were trying to hold both things. Yeah, we're the Lord's people, we're Israel, we're really proud of these tribes that we're part of, but we like Baal because worshipping him is a lot easier. You know, it's easy, we've got a set of rules, we just do this and that, and then he calls them out and says, you need to commit to the Lord. He says, be hot or be cold, but do not be found in the middle. It's prophetic. When you're always wrong in the middle. Ahab, the king, he links between naming his sons after names of God and following his queen Jezebel. And it reminds us of in Revelation when the Apostle John writes about this church in Laodicea. And this is what he writes in Revelation 3. He says, I know your deeds, that you're neither cold nor hot. I wish you were either one or the other. So because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I'm about to spit you out of my mouth. And you read this, if you're either hot or cold, you think, don't be lukewarm. Well, you think, well, lukewarm's nearly hot. That's not too bad, is it? That's on the way. But when you think about it, like, if you're hot for God and you're running for God, fantastic. But if you're cold for God and you're running away from Him, you will get to the point quicker when you realise that you are empty. When you're stuck in the middle, nothing happens. Commit. If the Lord is God, follow Him with everything that you are, everything that you own. They were uncertain and wavering in their understanding. And then thirdly, unworthy. Baal was unworthy of the adoration of the people of God. And you see sort of the way that Elijah starts to mock them. Right? I mean, the boldness of the man. It's just like these 850 prophets dancing around this altar, slashing themselves with knives, getting more and more raucous. And he starts going, it comes out better in the New Living Translation. Let me read this. It says, about noontime Elijah began mocking them. You'll have to shout louder, he scoffed, for surely he's a god. Perhaps he's daydreaming, or he's relieving himself. Or maybe he's away on a trip, or he's asleep and he needs to be wakened. And he's just humiliating these people. He's absolutely saying, where is he? Where is your God? And what you see with the abuse that Elijah is throwing at him is sort of saying, basically, that God of yours, he's just a little bit bigger than you. That's why you're worshipping him, because he's that little bit more, he's got a little bit more power than you. But he ain't the Lord. He ain't the Lord that can part a sea. He ain't the Lord that can speak stars into space. And we see, right, this is going to take some imagination, right? These are 12 stones, okay? These bog rolls, okay, right? And Elijah says, enough's enough. And he starts rebuilding the altar. And he says, this is Reuben. He says, this is Simeon. And people are watching him, and they remember the significance of all this. And he's naming them, and he's calling them out. And he puts the 10 tribes of Israel down, and they're looking. And he carries on. And he puts 2 more on. And it signifies the 12 tribes, all of them. They're a broken people. They're a divided people. And yet, he says that, look, the purposes of God are way, way bigger than your petty religious preferences, than your arguments, than your desires for the way you want things to be. He puts the 12 stones down and he says, right, get the water. He gets, 4 jugs of water, pour it on him. Do that 3 times. He's 12 bottles of water, jars of water, 1 for each tribe. He wants unity amongst his people. He really does. And it's like, a couple of times it's been said here this weekend that we're a church family. And real family means there are going to be difficulties. If they haven't been already, just give it time. There will be. There's moments when you clash and ideas are kind of, different to what you thought it was going to be. And when those personality clashes, or you think, the leaders should be going this way, but they're going that way. Listen, this is the way to deal with confrontation. This is the way to deal with difficulties or misunderstandings. You think to yourself and you get before God and honestly say, how is God going to be most glorified in this? And most often that means that you have to actually shut your mouth. You actually have to humble yourself and say, you know what? The way I treat my brother is going to be more glorifying to God than who's right in this one. And I want to commend these guys leading you, these 4 elders, okay? Just the little I know of them, they are men worthy of following. There's an integrity about them. They're not flashy, kind of, trying to make a name for themselves. Their sleeves are rolled up. They're amongst you, serving humbly, following God, and they're worth getting behind. Even if they get it wrong, you get behind. God is going to build a church around these guys. A church that's going to bring much glory to God. So the quicker you get behind and encourage them and make their life as easy as possible, the sooner this church is going to be built. We see that the prophets of Baal, they start cutting themselves. And blood flows out. And they get very, very noisy, especially towards the end. They get very raucous. Have you found that when you're talking to people about Jesus, that often before they make a decision to follow him or something happens, they get very noisy? I know I did. When people were telling me about Jesus, I was more obnoxious and more sort of horrible, and it looked like I was going further and further away, but I just needed a bigger and bigger front because I was getting more and more exposed, and I don't want you to see what I'm really like and how vulnerable I'm feeling with the message that you've got. Maybe someone in your family you're praying for, and every time you mention Jesus, it's like, rah! Just listen, they get loud before the defeat. The fight was unfair, it really was. But it wasn't unfair in as much as Elijah had his back against the wall. Because Elijah was representing the living God of the universe. It was unfair on them to think how pathetic their little sort of ideas of cutting themselves and shouting loud and all these things. They were totally outnumbered by our King in heaven. Elijah was who on earth can stand before the living God? It was a totally unfair fight. God's sacrifice was at a massive disadvantage at the cross. It talks in Revelation of the slaughtered lamb on a throne. The most weak, kind of sort of unthreatening figure that you can imagine. If you was to stand at the foot of the front of the cross looking up at Jesus, it would have looked so pathetic. A man so broken, so injured, so unthreatening. They had to unhook him from the cross and lay him in a grave. He bled out and dead. And in his most sort of weakened, vulnerable, broken state, he went toe-to-toe with death, with the hordes of hell, with sin, with death, with shame. And he won. When he was absolutely at his weakest, he won. It's like there is no comparison with our God. It really is an unfair fight if he is on your side. It's like, have you seen that Lion the Witch, not Lion the Witch, one of the C.S. Lewis ones where I've just seen it on the film where little Lucy is on a bridge and she pulls out this little knife and this kind of army coming towards her and they all run away and she thinks, yeah, I'm cool, but actually it's because Aslan's behind her. Listen, we go into our families, we go to our workplaces, we walk through the streets of Livingston and we feel like we've got a little dagger, but we have Aslan behind us with his teeth bared. Terrifying. And they slash themselves and blood flows. And they've got the right idea. Yeah, but it's the wrong blood. Their blood, the fact that it's in their body at all is a gift from our God. Yeah, actually, when Jesus' blood was shed, it meant that ours don't have to be. We can't cut ourselves or do some religious ritual and expect God to do our bidding. We don't pray our prayers and say, God, you now owe me a good life. Come on, Lord. And we twist his arm up his back and say, you need to bless me. Look, I've been telling people about you. I've come to church early. I've set chairs out. No. We can't twist God's arm. He's the King of the universe. The fact that we have blood in our body is a gift. The fact that we take our next breath is the mercy of that God. And he's unworthy. Now Elijah mocks these prophets of Baal. He says, who on earth is this God? And he mocks him. On the cross, Jesus was mocked. And he says, if you are the Christ, come down. And then it's like Nehemiah when he's rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. His enemies are arrayed against him and saying, what on earth are you doing? Come down from there. He says, I can't come down. I'm about a great work. You know, when we feel mocked at what we're doing, you know, we're about a great work. They might not see it. All they might see is rubble or a broken man on a cross. But we're about the work of the King. We're commissioned to take this gospel to a needy land. In Laodicea, at the end of Revelation, when John writes to that church, he says this. He says, Revelation 3:20, here I am, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person and they with me. And I just want to kind of finish here, really, and just invite us all to open the door of our heart and say, Lord, we don't feel particularly great. You know, we feel like our back's against the wall. Certainly when it's okay when we're in here together, we're all sort of on the same side and we can buoy each other up. But when you go home, when you get out of the train station, when you have to deal with your neighbours or take your kids to school, you're on your own at the school gate, and it's there. It's there. We are commissioned from God, and we have that little dagger with Aslan behind us. We are commissioned by God. We are his heralds. We actually get to share the gospel. We don't have to. We get to do it. We're on his side. He's with us. You know, and the commission of God is for us. And I guess I'd like to pray. I'd like us to pray together for Livingston. I'd like us to pray for West Lothian. I'd like us to pray that God will help us to realise the dignity of the message that we carry and the fact that he knew what he's doing when he chose us. It really ain't a sort of oversight. It wasn't like you come in and you thought, no, what have I done? I was expecting to be so much better. He really knows what he's working with. And you are called for such a time as this. It really is. You are his mouthpiece. There's no plan B. This is it. And I'd love us to just sort of raise our voices together and pray for God to move in such power, to do things that only God can do, to win souls that just seem so impossibly hard, and that just afresh open the door of our hearts and say, Lord, such as I am, I'm yours. If you can use this mouth, then use it for your glory. If you can use these hands for your glory, then they're yours. Is that okay? We're all right to do that? Can I invite you to stand? I'm going to pray over us, and then I'd like us to just raise our voices together.